part of your screen name. So you can see this here on my name. You see my name, Amy Ramos, followed by my affiliation, which is Hardering Company. To change your screen name, you just click on the top right-hand side of your picture or your video. If you are a Community Steering Committee member or CSC members, we do ask you to use the following naming convention. That is, you use your first, comma, last name. If you are a resident, you make sure that you could use the R before your name. And all other participants that are here today, so seeing some folks from the port of Stockton, please do make sure that you add your first and last name followed by your affiliation. We do ask that you take care of this because we do use your name, especially for residents that are participating in the stipend program. We use your name to ensure that we take attendance for these meetings. If you are calling in through your phone and also showing your video through your own computer device, we do ask that you merge your video and audio so that we can only hear you or see you once and we don't see two of you. To change your screen name, you're going to make sure that you do that now. So I'm going to give folks about 30 seconds to do that. I'm looking at my screen and seeing that everyone has renamed themselves, except I see a Mike's phone and a J Reese. If you could please go ahead and rename yourself with your affiliation, we would greatly appreciate that. If you do need help, just go ahead and ask. You can put the request in the chat and someone from our team will be sure to rename you. So I'm not quite sure who Mike's phone is, so if you could please let us know by either unmuting or putting it in the chat, we can go ahead and rename you.
Sorry, I'm driving. This is Mike Higgins with HDR Engineering.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate that. So just as a reminder, some of our virtual meeting etiquette, please do stay on mute unless you are speaking or planning to speak. You can use *6 if you're participating by phone, just like Mike is. You can also raise your hand on Zoom if you would like to ask any questions throughout the meeting. You don't have to wait to ask a question. Raise your hand and we will ensure that you can ask your question. If you are part of the residential stipend program, please make sure that you stay on for about 75% of the meeting to be eligible for a stipend. That does equate to about 90 minutes of today's meeting. To ensure that we have smooth translation, we do ask that you use your name before you start asking a question so the translator can be sure to translate who is asking the question. As you already know, we make sure that we adhere to these group agreements. So I won't go through all of these as you all have requested that we show them on the screen. You can read them on your own, but know that as your facilitators, we may have to step in at times during the conversation to ensure that we are following these agreements. And as always, if you think of a different agreement or you would like to support enforcing one of these agreements, please feel free to jump in and support in that process. We do want to make sure that we are all cultivating a safe space for us to feel comfortable engaging in the conversation. For today's meeting, we do not have a community co-host. We do always want to have a community co-host. So if in the future you are interested in being a community co-host, please do reach out to the Air District or to Laura or myself. So with that said, we are ready to officially kick off the meeting. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Stephanie from the Air District for some welcoming remarks.
Thank you so much, Amy. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Stephanie Ng, and I'm a program manager in our Community Strategies and Resources Department, which oversees the implementation of the AB617 program. Like Amy mentioned, I was just reflecting that this has been, 49 meetings has definitely been a long time, and we continue to thank you all for your commitment. Just looking across this Zoom screen, I see so many faces that have kind of been here since the start. So we continue to appreciate everyone's commitment to the process and just your commitment to improving the air quality in the Stockton community. We have a jam-packed agenda today with lots of really great updates. So just looking forward to digging into them. With that, I will pass it back to Amy.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And just to plug in the need for a community co-host, this would be an opportunity for the community co-host to provide some welcoming remarks as well. But since we don't have one tonight, just would like to bring your attention to tonight's agenda. As you can see here, as Steph mentioned, we do have a packed agenda, so I will do my best to keep us on track. And if we do run over on agenda items, I might ask you to consider whether or not we need to move a conversation to a separate meeting, or if we would like to reprioritize today's agenda. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and move us to our first agenda item. So we're going to start with today's action item tracker. And I believe I am passing it to Rocio at this time. Rocio, please go ahead.
Thank you, Amy. This is Rocio. Good evening, everyone. Let me go ahead and start sharing my screen to start with the action items. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so starting off with the pending action items. The first one, in the last CSC meeting, folks were interested in receiving or being able to access the purple air monitors that are going to be installed in the schools in Stockton. So once those sensors are deployed, the Air District will make sure that the links to the monitors are accessible on the Stockton Community Air Monitoring page. And moving on to the next action item. In the last CSC meeting, folks were also interested in receiving an update on the tree measure, as well as starting up a tree subcommittee. So for today, we're going to have an update on the urban greening and vegetative barriers measure, and then we'll make sure to start the subcommittee meeting in the next coming months. And moving on to the third action item, the CSC was interested in having a fact sheet for the passenger vehicle replacement program. And so the district is working on this fact sheet, and we'll share it with the CSC in the next coming up meeting. And moving on to the fourth action item for the Air District to host an informational open house event where CSC members and residents of the Stockton community can learn about CERT measures, apply to programs, and all things Stockton related. And so the Air District is currently looking into this request and will bring updates to the CSC. And moving on to the completed action items. So the first one was for Cassandra and Jermaine to connect around outreach strategies in the AB617 schools. So Jermaine and Cass have connected, and they're currently planning an outreach event at an AB617 school. So more details to come for this event. And the next action item was for the Air District to share with the CSC opportunities for an in-person meeting this year. And so we're super excited to say that we are planning for an in-person meeting this year in April. And Stephanie will share more details on this later in the meeting. And moving on to the last completed action item for the Port of Stockton to return to the CSC meeting and provide an updated presentation. And so the Port of Stockton is here with us today, and they'll be sharing an update on the truck reroute study. And that is all for the action items. So I'm happy to take any questions at this moment. I don't see any hands raised or anything in the chat, so I can pass it back to Amy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rocio, for that comprehensive update. It's so important to ensure that there is transparency in the implementation of all of the requested action items, and the Air District is providing just that today. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and transition to our next agenda item. As Rocio mentioned, we have carved out some time today to listen to an update from the Port of Stockton to talk specifically about the truck reroute study results, discuss some potential opportunities with how it aligns to one of the CERT measures. But during today's presentation, you'll have an opportunity to hear a comprehensive update. This is really an informational update for the CSC to know exactly what's happening, for you to ask questions, and to really walk away from today's conversation with a better understanding of the status of the truck reroute study. So with that said, I see Jeff is here, so I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Jeff.
Hi, good evening. Thanks, everybody.
Sorry, I'm still making my way home, but yes, we did want to give an update on the truck study. We have been moving forward and making some progress on the rerouting. And just for everybody's background, I think most of you know, but we are doing what we can to make sure that we get port trucks out of the adjacent neighborhood. We have done a significant amount of getting the trucks out of the neighborhood by extending the crosstown freeway. So a lot of the trucks coming in now, it used to be that 100% of the trucks would go through the neighborhood. Now we're probably down to 20% of the trucks because they now have the option to get off on Navy, make a right, and then come into the port that way, or take Highway 4 out to the port of the Stockton Expressway. So we've upgraded our infrastructure to be able to get directly onto Rough and Ready Island, which is what we now call the West Complex as well. So as you pointed out, so Mike Higgins is with us, and I don't know if Ravi is on as well, but Mike, do you want to talk a little bit about, so the port has hired HDR consultants, engineering team to look at opportunities and different options for getting the small incremental amount of trucks now that are going up Fresno Avenue, going through the neighborhood directly next to Washington Elementary, and trying to figure out a way to get the trucks that are reaching the restricted area of the East Complex and trying to find a new route for that. One of the things that's really complicating this is at-grade rail crossings. I think Mike's going to talk a little bit about that. So Mike, are you at a place now that you can speak freely about the update, or do we need to wait for you?
No, if Robbie's on, he can speak to it. If not, I think I'm just pulling up to
I'm
a spot
on
I can.
as well, Mike. I'm on.
All right, Robbie, go for it.
Okay,
Thanks,
very
Robbie.
good. Very good. Thanks for the introduction there, Jeff. Yeah, I'm Ravi Narayanan with HDR. Mike Higgins and myself and our team is engaged in a preliminary feasibility level or planning level engineering study for access improvements, for truck access improvements via Washington Street and Ventura Avenue. We are looking at the segment of Washington Street extending east from Navy Drive intersection all the way through the intersection with Ventura Avenue, and then the segment of Ventura Avenue from Washington Street extending north to the port, the East Campus port access facility. So in a broad nutshell, what we are doing right now, and I'll try and turn my camera on. Hopefully you can all see me, if you're able to see me. Yeah.
There it is.
Okay, so in terms of the scope of improvements we are looking at a general 4-lane section on Washington Street for the project limits that I just mentioned. What we are looking at is one eastbound through lane and one westbound through lane for vehicles with a two-way left turn median center lane, and then a dedicated truck-only parking queuing lane on the south side. So a four-lane section with 3 travel lanes and 1 queuing parking lane for trucks is the conceptual section we are looking at for Washington Street, just to allow adequate room for trucks to safely wait and idle or queue up as they are trying to find gaps or trying to basically stage trucks before, especially when there is a railroad, when the railroad is in use for a train that is passing through the study limits. So that's the section we are looking at for Washington Street. And then the other section is Ventura Avenue between Washington and Port Road, the Harbor Street, which is the port access road to the north. So that section will have a dedicated truck access route that would kind of swing west of the existing Ventura Road alignment. And we are also looking at the potential for accommodating a larger detention basin for box track neighborhood, working with the county in terms of accommodating a larger pond, if you will, to accommodate the drainage discharge or the underground infiltration from the box track neighborhood. So those are the high level constraints we are looking at that we will be accommodating as part of the truck access improvements. What we will have happen is Ventura Avenue will swing around and up north of the box track neighborhood to provide a dedicated access to the East Campus, just not too far away from the existing Harbor Street access point. So the purpose and intent of the project is to have an efficient truck access route away and around the box track neighborhood. And we will have signage and other types of information posted for trucks to avoid the current routes through the box tracks neighborhood that may be impacting the residences and the school out there. So we are in the early stages there right now, just doing high-level conceptual planning and engineering. So it'll be about maybe spring, summer before we have what we call a project report equivalent ready to share and be approved by the port. But right now we are in the process of getting our information and so forth. So I hope that suffices for today.
Thank you so
One thing
much,
I'll
Rob.
just
Amy, before we jump in, I'm not sure, Jeff, if you've seen questions, so I'd like to read some of those questions that you have several questions and a couple hands raised. So Jeff, I'll let you go ahead and then I'll go ahead and read the questions for you all.
Yeah, no, the only other thing I was going to add is that, yeah, it's just everywhere we look, there's just rail surrounding all these improvements, other than going with a longer term plan to come up over the San Joaquin River again, which may be that the Ventura is kind of an early alternate to a short-term fix. And I think that's what we've discussed previously with our traffic consultant. And then with the longer-term fix to potentially do a clearance over the San Joaquin River. One other thing I was going to mention that I hadn't really taken into consideration, I think I mentioned it in this meeting before, is even if we get the port trucks out of the neighborhood with a new Ventura route, that wouldn't necessarily alleviate all the trucks going through the neighborhood. But one of the concepts that I saw earlier today from HDR contemplates being able to route trucks, say going to Penny Newman and potentially other industrial businesses north of Boggs Tract through the improvements that we're talking about on Ventura. So while it wasn't ideal what I thought we were going to be looking at, it does solve one of those issues that I thought was going to be a long-term issue, and that is removing the Penny Newman trucks and other industrial users up in that same general area. So go ahead. You wanted to ask about the questions?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. This is Amy. So we have a couple questions from the chat, so we're going to start with that, and then we'll call on folks who have raised their hand. So in the chat, Mary Elizabeth asks, when will the SUSD purple air monitors be installed? Do you have a time frame for that?
Oh, I don't think that's for me.
Thanks, Jeff. This question is actually for Stockton Unified, and I see that Jermaine actually provided a response right under that. So Amy, if you would just want to verbalize that, that'll respond to that.
Oh, great. I didn't scroll down. Thank you. So it looks like 34 school monitors were already installed, and we'll get more updates regarding when they'll be online. I also see a question or mostly a comment from Gloria, and it's also agreed to from Mary Elizabeth. It would be really useful to visualize this section on Washington Street with the satellite imagery. So wondering if you all have any of those visuals.
Yeah, Ravi, I don't know if that's anything that you have that you can share.
Yeah, I have a high level a project imagery of the study area that I can share for purposes of today's call. I'm going to try and share my screen. I hope it works. If everybody is able to see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, this is from our scoping document, just to give you a high-level overview of the project limits that I just went over when I spoke earlier. So this pretty much shows the alignment along for Washington Street from east of the intersection with Navy Drive, extending up to Ventura and then north. Again, it is conceptual feasibility level studies that we are undertaking. We are in the process of discussing many of these items internally with staff at the port, and it will be, like I say, by the first or second quarter of this year, or closer towards spring, that we will have some preliminary concepts to share, contingent upon having an approved project report equivalent.
Can folks see that? It's a little
Think
small on
so,
my
yes.
screen.
Could you make it a little larger?
Okay, let me try and do that here. Is that better?
Thank you, Ravi.
Yes.
Okay, so trying to get
And
this
Robbie, this is Amy. I'm also wondering, or a couple of CSC members are wondering if it would be possible to get a copy of the scoping plan.
Yeah, I will make something available to the group. Just realize, and I will caveat it, it's conceptual at this point. You know, we're still tweaking things. We still have to have some discussions with San Joaquin County, because if you look, maybe Ravi, if you could point out where the overflow base is for Boggs Track.
Maybe for the benefit of this audience, I'll just say the high level constraints we are looking at right now for this corridor improvement is the existing railroad on the south side of Washington Street that we will have to deal with in terms of preserving adequate clearance space related to the railroad center line on the south side of Washington Street. And then going back to the point that Jeff, you wanted me to point out is where my pointer is here, right there. There is an existing pond, a retention pond, which is undersized for the discharge needs from the adjacent box tract. And the county has plans for a much larger pond that they have laid out, which would be to the west of this existing pond that you see here. And I can try and see if I can zoom closer. The picture gets a bit grainy as I do that. But be that as it may, yeah, there you go. This is the existing pond, and we're going to have a larger pond. I believe the county is looking at a discharge capacity of about 8 acre-feet that they'd like us to accommodate in this general area. And we are looking at roadway alignments to the west of the existing alignment of Ventura Avenue for routing trucks through the dedicated access that would still accommodate a larger retention pond for the county. And those are the items that we are working on right now. And like I say, we'll share it when we are ready.
Thank you, Robbie. This is Amy. I'm also seeing that Douglas has his hand raised. Douglas, go ahead.
Douglas, if you're saying something, you're still on mute. You should.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear
Hi,
you.
Douglas.
I'm so, yeah. I'm a little concerned. I'm a little confused. I was, Jeff was talking about regarding to where the truck gonna be laid out. And I somehow last week the planning commission were discussing an area near somewhere by the trailer park, and to widen that and move by the that they're building like 40,000, 40,000 truck, more space to accommodate the truck parking. And I was wondering if that will have lesser pollution relocating from that avenue from the Charter Way, where what is it, by, I don't know, by Jack in the Box, around that area, and then by Washington, where there a lot of truck drivers have built, their station around that area. I was that will able to, because it's a lot of it's too generic to me. That I know there's a lot of generic. It's not. I think don't even understand that the county. But yeah, it's not making it specific what you're referring to when I'm trying to understand what your presentation is about. Thank you.
Okay, yes, this is probably different than what the county is working on as far as, I think you're talking about some of the truck stops potentially down near Charter Way. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, this for the port is just our main objective with this planning is really to get trucks from traveling down Fresno, any part of Fresno, between Harbor and, let's say, Charter, or just north of Charter, to access the port. So right now there aren't a lot of trucks that are going through there, but there's still enough that, and there's still enough that are impacting the neighborhood. So what we're trying to do is figure out how to get the last bit of trucks out from, driving through the neighborhood. So it's probably a different effort that the county is talking about.
Okay, can you? Okay, okay. Thank you, Jeff, for that feedback. But definitely, I would like the people who is in that are listening to check out the last week planning commission and help me identify why are there arguing, because there was a lot of protests about that. Even the residents didn't want the truck there where they're living and want to move to somewhere else. So I just want to make sure that things that doesn't happen, they're going to vote on it. I don't know if they passed it or not, but I definitely want to make sure that this committee will understand where the decision make congestion with other part of other areas. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, thank you so much.
Douglas,
Okay, thanks.
Amy, thank you so much for that question. And it sounds like we have an action item. So as a committee, to receive more information on the other truck studies that the county is doing and the truck stops that Jeff was mentioning. And so we can be sure to circle back with you and at the future planning meeting so that can be discussed. As a reminder, this presentation from the Port of Stockton really is an informational presentation. There is no decision that the CSC is making tonight. We are in listening mode and kind of learning about what is happening. Jeff, there is a couple hands raised and we have a couple questions in the chat. So have the residents living adjacent to these sections been notified about the project?
Are you talking about near Ventura or Fresno?
Gloria, can you clarify?
Both of those sections. I'm particularly looking at these neighborhoods closer to the Washington Street, but yes, Ventura as well.
I don't know if we've done any specific outreach yet, as we were trying to figure out if this alignment would even work with the city and the county. But that will be something we will be doing very soon.
And just as a quick follow, correct me if I'm wrong, does this imply that there is construction adjacent to this residence?
There would be some construction adjacent to the residence, correct?
Okay, then
If we were to move forward with this alignment, yes. It's further away. Well,
The conceptual that I'll share with you is a little further away from the residents than what this is showing, but that's something we will not be able to avoid is some construction, but we can limit it hopefully to hours that will reduce impacts to the neighbors.
Okay, can we get a follow-up on that for the next meeting?
Yeah, we should, and I'm happy to provide updates as needed on our progress on this. So yeah, we can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm seeing a hand raised from Cynthia. Cynthia, please go ahead.
Thanks, Cynthia here. Quick question about what mitigation measures are you guys potentially looking at? Like you had there was a mention of that parking lot for the westbound side. Are you all anticipating adding like vegetative barriers around the parking lot? I think one of the biggest concerns has been idling as well in the community. So just wondering about where are you all at in including some mitigation measures in this plan?
Yeah, my plan is to definitely have a vegetative barrier anywhere along the eastern boundary of the port that we can fit one. I don't know what parking lot. We're not planning to put any parking lot and have any truck staging or idling whatsoever. In fact, we do a lot of enforcement and routine checks with trucks on a daily basis to make sure folks aren't idling. So which parking lot were you referring to?
Yeah, I think somebody when they're going over the presentation, they were just talking about while they're waiting for the train to go by. I thought I had heard it was going to be like kind of a parking lane where they like a separate third lane where they're like parking,
Oh,
quote. I think
got
sorry,
it.
I didn't
Yes,
mean
yeah.
parking lot, like parking lane.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So it won't be well, right now the situation is that yes, if there's a rail line that parallels Washington Street to just to the south, and when there is rail coming through, traffic does back up. And so the widening of Washington, and I'm only talking about widening to Washington in the area of the port, not in the neighborhood. But that would allow trucks not to back up right there, and not to have to, wait for trucks to turn right so that they can continue to go forward. Does that make sense? And maybe Ravi could explain it better.
Yeah, I think you explained it, Jeff. Basically, what's happening is when you have a truck sitting there trying to wait for the train to clear before they're able to make a right turn movement, especially from the eastbound direction, it hinders traffic flow in the eastbound direction as trucks are waiting for the train to clear. With this queuing or parking lane feature we are providing with the 4-lane widening of Washington Street, we are essentially separating out trucks from the travel lanes. So the trucks will be basically using that as a service lane for queuing and parking purposes. And the eastbound through traffic would have its own dedicated vehicular lane for traffic to flow through without having to be impeded by the waiting trucks.
That makes a lot more sense. Thank you. Now, and I think I have a follow-up question based on that. How are you all, is there any plan to ensure that no other cars are going into there? Like, how is this going to be separated to be specifically, or, a food for thought, maybe a follow-up item is how you all going to make sure that only trucks are in that lane? Because I think at least what I've been seeing in a lot of the freeway expansion projects throughout the valley have been like the goal was to reduce that traffic, but it ends up making it kind of worse in a sense. So just kind of trying to think about how, if there's going to be any enforcement associated with that to make sure like this lane is only for the trucks to get through while they're waiting to get into the port. Because I know people want to get home as fast as possible, and sometimes they go into lanes that they're not supposed to.
Yeah, we have that occasionally now. Even right now on Navy Drive, there's a truck lane only, and our port police, we do have our own port police that enforce that pretty significantly. So that will be enforced by port police.
Thank you.
And they're giving out a lot of tickets lately too. So they didn't used to as much, but they're pretty active. The other thing too is, yeah, another point that just came to my mind was that we are seeing a lot of traffic that folks trying to come home. Let's say they're coming from maybe the Brentwood area or something like that, to Stockton or Tracy, and they're on Highway 4. They sometimes, if there's any backup, they will try to cut through the port and utilize that as a kind of a shortcut. And so one of the things the concepts we're looking at is potentially putting up a restricted gate or at least a monitored gate at the Port of Stockton Expressway and Highway 4, just to avoid additional traffic coming through the port, people trying to cut through. It's also kind of a security concern for us. We've had some thefts and some other break-ins and things like that. So that will give us a little bit more control and hopefully reduce kind of some of the impacts that you're talking about.
Great.
And I'll
Thank
share
you so much.
updates I'll share updates on that too as we make progress. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Amy. Thank you, Jeff and Robbie, for those updates. I'm seeing a couple more questions. I think these are for Robbie. I see a question for Mary Elizabeth. Is HDR doing the drainage design too?
Oh, for the retention pond?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not part of our current roadway improvements task that the port has entrusted us with, but depending on the scope of the improvements for the drainage pond, that could be an additional item later. But this currently we are focusing on the truck access improvements, meaning roadway improvements only.
Yeah, and that is port property where that drainage basin is located. We've kind of coordinated with the county to provide, because there's not good drainage within Boggs Tract, and so we have offered that parcel there. So we want to try to accomplish two things: one, to remove the traffic from the neighborhood, but also make sure that there is enough capacity there for stormwater runoff and reduce flooding, because the area was not built with a lot of great stormwater runoff infrastructure.
Thank you for that clarification. And Jeff, it looks like Mary Elizabeth has another follow-up question. What is the proportion of drayage trucks to non-drayage trucks and total truck calls to the Port of Stockton? So looking at some ratios.
Yeah, let me. I don't have that off the top of my head. I know some numbers that we talked about with Fair and Pierce some time ago, because we were doing truck counts through the neighborhood. I don't want to get it wrong, so I want to, if I can go back and I'll provide that to the group, just the total truck counts and drayage versus non-drayage. And we're talking, just to make sure, your definition of drayage is trucks that are carrying and
regulatory.
Yes. Okay. So anything carrying maritime commerce. Okay. Yeah, I can follow up on that. It's not as much as you would think, but I will provide a follow up on that.
And just a quick comment on that, because I know that there's some interest in some rail, and the BNSF terminal in Stockton is considered a regulatory intermodal transport facility, and so all of those trucks are also considered drayage. So I don't know what the implications are on that yet.
They aren't, there really aren't any for the port, but yes, they are a Class 1 intermodal rail terminal that it also falls under that drayage truck requirement. But yes, I will follow up, Mary, and provide that information.
This is Amy. Thank you, Jeff. I'm not seeing any other questions for you all. Do you all have anything else that you'd like to share?
I don't think so. I'm happy to provide updates as regularly as it seems to make sense or as the group wants. So feel free to reach out and we'll give the information.
Wonderful. And I see Stephanie's raised her hand, but before I pass it to you, Stephanie, I just want to acknowledge that Mary Elizabeth also asked about whether there's a truck rerouting subcommittee, and just want to remind the CSC that there is a truck rerouting subcommittee that hasn't met since March. But as Jeff mentioned, these meetings are a great opportunity for the Port of Stockton to provide updates. So I think it would be great to have Jeff and his team come back and have the updates here at future meetings once they're ready to provide an update. Go ahead, Stephanie. Go ahead, Jeff.
I would just say, or if there is a subcommittee meeting or a desire to have one, we're happy to show up and to share these concepts and dive into the stuff a little deeper if that'd be helpful.
Thanks, Jeff. And yeah, I just wanted to wrap us up and maybe just kind of offer some closing thoughts from the district on this. And I just wanted to thank Jeff. He's been a great partner in bringing updates to our committee, just generally from the port and also your partners at HDR. But yeah, I obviously think from the group, there's been a lot of engagement and interest in the topic. We do have maybe like a quick clarification. We have a heavy duty truck subcommittee, which also I think folds in. Typically, we've been talking about, for those that have been following our heavy duty truck incentive program, and also some like enforcement and regulatory topics related to trucks. But to Jeff's point, I do think if there's interest in holding that space to maybe dig a little deeper into this study, that could be something that we do. I do wonder, Jeff, and maybe something that we can continue to work with you on. And it sounds like, I think this update is definitely important for the committee, but also something for us that we want to continue to think about too, is we do have funding in the CERP to potentially leverage that funding and kind of partner with the port where we see opportunities. And so we definitely, Jeff, want to continue to work with you to kind of help support wherever we can. And so I'm wondering, Jeff, if maybe it makes sense as you all, however the committee feels, but I do get the sense that you all are actively working on this and that maybe you might have some findings. It sounds like kind of closer to the spring, and that might be worth sharing. Do you think a good time to bring you all back?
Yeah, that's fine if there's not a desire to bring us back sooner. Absolutely.
Yeah, happy to hear from the group, but I also, I'm sure that you all in the couple of months as you all are working on this will have additional findings for the group to be able to kind of hear more progress as it's kind of ongoing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're happy to do that. And one other thing I did want to mention before we wrap this up is that the port is also hosting a zero emission trucking conference February 28th and 29th. So we're going to have at least, I want to say 10 to 15 manufacturers out there with zero emission trucks. We're going to have the Air District's going to be out, and CalStart and others. And so it's really, for the port, it's really designed to push zero emission trucks to our tenants and provide them kind of a one-stop shop to test drive the trucks, but also then to sit down and look at different incentives and to see, how, where they could save money and how they could, initiate the process to purchasing zero emission equipment. So that's a good opportunity. And if there's anybody from this group that would want to attend, there is a fee for folks to attend, but if you're interested from this group, I'm sure I can work with our organizers to get that fee waived if people are looking to do that. And I think I just saw it. That is February 28th and 29th. I think the 29th is the focus. It's Leap Day. That's the real focused, where there's going to be speakers and the majority of the ride and drive. There's going to be a zero emission convoy that's going to start and go outside the port and come back in. But we're really trying to make it a celebration and get our tenants excited about transitioning to zero emissions. So that's great. It's exciting. We're expecting hundreds of people to come out. So I really welcome anybody from this group that wants to just come and learn and see what the great technology is out there, but also to see how we're pushing to get cleaner equipment at the port.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And it sounds like You have raised a lot of excitement in the group. I'm seeing several hands raised. So Eugene, go ahead. And Jermaine, I do see your hand, but I'm gonna call on the CSC members first, and then I'll call on.
I wanted to know what time on the 29th, what is the time?
I believe it's going to start around 10 a.m., but I will send, can I send the flyer to the Air District and this group, and then you can send it out to the entire CSC?
Yes, Jeff, go ahead and send it to us and we will share with the entire group.
Okay. It would be great if you are planning to attend, if you could just let me know somehow, that would be wonderful. And then I can get those clearances for the folks who are interested.
Thank you. Margot, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Jeff. So I've mentioned that this was upcoming in early 2024. So thank you for following through with that. And I've mentioned it at planning commission meetings and city council meetings in all the various cities here, because people do not have the right data on what's available out there. And so have you reached out to those people as well, or is that something you need us to do, or what are your thoughts?
We've reached out to the city. We have reached out to COG. We have let me see who else
I mean, specifically all the cities like Tracy, Manteca, and all those people that are working on this right now.
I believe so. I believe the organizer has, but I will verify and I will follow up with you if he feels like we need any additional outreach. I think at this point he's kind of concerned we're going to get too many people, but that'd be a great problem to have.
Great, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Margot. Hector, please go ahead.
Hi, Jeff. I just had a question as far as how many trucks do you think are going to be available for the ride and drive? And then what manufacturers are coming out?
Yeah, I believe there's going to be, I would say between 15 and 20 different trucks you can ride and drive. They're not all going to be like Class 8. There's going to be some smaller like box van. I think there's going to be a electric school bus, at least one or two. But I believe there should, so like Nikola, I believe Exos. I don't know if Tesla is. I think Volvo, Kenworth. I'm trying to remember from the flyer, but I'll send that out to you. And it's got them all listed on there.
Thank you so much. So it sounds like this is an action item. We'll have a comprehensive update with next steps and how to get engaged via the air districts and our follow-up email. Jeremiah, did you have a question related to this topic before I pass it to the air district?
Sure, I have two questions. One, I heard Jeff was talking about infrastructure and storm drains. I want to know if when they're putting down storm drains, are they setting it to the MS4 bill for storm drains water when they're doing infrastructure? That was a bill that was passed in 2020, and we have to adhere to for recycling water within that infrastructure. Would that the port would be doing stuff like that to upgrade? That's one. And I know that you speak about your trucks that is coming, which I'm very excited about. Are we going as 50% knowing that, 2024 to 2026, we do have the options that we have to buy anything is 50%? Is the port going in that route knowing that 2027 in California, we're not allowed to buy any vehicles that is not zero emissions in that way?
The port is. So just for your awareness, the port doesn't own any of the Class 8 trucks. So the tenants operate and either contract with folks or do own some themselves. So we're trying to incentivize them on the truck side. As far as zero emission, like cargo handling equipment that the port does own, yes, we are pushing for zero emission by anything we purchase now, if it's feasible to purchase zero emission. And for a lot of the equipment that we own, there's still payloaders and certain equipment that there just isn't the technology there. But anything that is feasible, we purchase zero emission.
Great, thank you. Stephanie?
Thanks, Amy. I maybe just have one last thing while we have Jeff here with us and talking about fort-related things. I know Rocio talked about it during her action items, but we in April do plan to have an in-person meeting. And I don't know if folks recall, but last year when we planned our April meeting, Jeff had generously offered, and it sounded like there was interest even last year to work with Jeff to potentially host a meeting at the Port of Stockton. And so I just maybe wanted to announce to folks while we have Jeff here with us for this update that we do plan to hold our next in-person meeting at the port and just work with Jeff. I know a lot of people have been on it, but I think given that we'll be in the space and coordinating with Jeff for those that haven't been on a port tour, I think he's kindly offered that, we'll send out details, but we envision maybe ahead of the meeting, we can do a little tour at the Port of Stockton as well. So maybe I'll just tee that up and we'll definitely share information with folks, as we get close to the meeting, but just wanted to share that as we have Jeff here with us for this update.
Yeah, that's great. We're excited. So hopefully people will take us up on the opportunity to have a tour. Looking forward to it.
Great, thank you. Well, that concludes the item. Thank you so much, Jeff and Rivi, for making time to join us today and provide a lot of clarifying information. Oh, who's that? Eugene, go ahead.
Yes. The last in-person meeting was in the evening. And if this was going to be a tour, would it be in the daytime?
Great question. So currently the drafted plans are to have the tour start during the day. So we would meet earlier and then the meeting itself would continue into the evening.
Would you think that bring a burden to have it split in that order?
Maybe it sounds like you've thought of a burden that perhaps we haven't thought about, Eugene.
Well, when you say a tour, maybe like at 10, 11, then come back at 5 or 6.
That's a
depending on the location and the distance.
That's right.
That some people will have to travel.
Thanks,
This is why I bring those questions.
Thanks, Dr. Farrell. This is Stephanie. Maybe just as the follow-up, that's a really great point, and I don't think we were imagining to bring people at different times. We'll have what we're planning on and working with Jeff to have the port tour right before the meeting. And hopefully, I think by the time April hits, we should have enough daylight to be able to do that right before the meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Farrell.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for engaging in that rich conversation. It sounds like we have a lot of action items that we'll follow up on. And with that said, we're going to go ahead and shift our focus to discussing the Delta Climate Adaptation Plan, which is currently under development for the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. So during this presentation, I see Annie and Morgan are now on camera. They both will be sharing some of their strategies and actions to adapt and respond to identified community vulnerabilities, such as high flood risk and extreme heat in the Stockton community, as well as water supply and quality and levees that protect residents, farmland, and mass flooding. During this time, this is an opportunity for the CSC to be engaged, for you to listen to the presentation, provide your questions, provide your input. So we do also anticipate having a lot of questions during this time. As before, please raise your hand or add it in the chat. And I see Stephanie has raised her hand. Go ahead.
Thanks, Amy. And I just maybe wanted to provide a little context because I think this might feel a little bit different. I don't think we've ever, in what I can remember, had like us talk about this climate plan before. And so our partners over at the San Joaquin Council of Governments, SJCOG, actually introduced us to the Delta Stewardship Council, who's presenting today. They are wanting to engage with, all communities that are impacted by this plan, which includes the Stockton community here. And so that's kind of the intersection of why this group is here today. They, are aware that we have this group that's really interested in, air quality, climate topics, and we're approached by, we were connected by the COG. And so we're really happy and grateful to both Annie and Morgan for being here to talk to us about this. And yeah, with that, I just wanted to provide that little background of how this agenda item came about. But with that, happy to pass over to the Delta Stewardship Council.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Yeah, thanks, Stephanie, for the extra background. And hi, everyone. We're super happy to be here. I'm Morgan Chow. I'm a planner at the Stewardship Council, and Annie Merritt is also here with us. We'll be tag teaming this presentation. So yeah, I see some folks that we're familiar with and we know, and many new folks too. Tonight we're going to share two of our initiatives, both our climate adaptation work that we've been working on since 2018, and then also our environmental and tribal justice work that began more recently in 2021. But as you'd expect, there's a ton of overlap in the work. And so we're just going to be focusing tonight on what we're finding and what we want to hear from you around climate equity in Stockton. And we really want to incorporate this group's priorities into what we're working on, which is an adaptation plan for the region, working towards a public draft this spring. So next slide, please. So these two initiatives, a little bit more, our climate adaptation work, or what we call Delta Adapts, is a two-part initiative that began with a vulnerability assessment to understand the region's like vulnerabilities and assets that are at risk to climate change. And then the second piece is this adaptation plan, which is how to address those vulnerabilities. And our environmental and tribal justice initiative has these three main goals. Our first is really to build a network of community leaders. A lot of the Delta Stewardship Council, our agency, is a relatively new agency, and we're just really beginning to build relationships with community organizations and tribes in the region. Through part of this, we formed an environmental justice expert group, which several organizations from Stockton are part of, and I see some tonight. And then we're working to identify environmental justice issues. So we've done that through interviewing community organizations and tribes. We hosted the council's first tribal listening session with several tribes. We've been doing an in-depth literature review, building from what we've heard from those interviews. We've analyzed 10 years of public comment to the council related to environmental justice concerns. And then we've been pulling information from other workshops that our agency has hosted or participated in. And the last piece will be to really identify options to address those issues. So that'll be in the format of a paper that we're also hoping to bring to our council for action on this spring. Next slide. So before I go any further, for those that might not be familiar with our agency, the Delta Stewardship Council, we are, as I said, relatively new. We were created in 2009 by the Delta Reform Act, which really aimed to have an agency that would promote the restoration of the Delta ecosystem and help provide a more reliable statewide water supply. And we have the law required us to create a Delta plan, which is our long-term management plan for the Delta. We have about 70 staff, and we have a 7-member board of members that are appointed by the governor. I see a hand raised. Go ahead.
Hi, Douglas. Go ahead.
Yeah. Who's the woman that's speaking right now? I didn't get her name. What's her name?
Oh, it's Morgan Chow.
Hi, Morgan. I really appreciate your presentation. I was wondering, are you coalition with Delta? No, what's it called? The Delta Restore Project. Are you related to those particular groups?
I think this is Stephanie. I think Morgan, for you to know, I think Douglas, are you talking about Restore the Delta that's on our committee?
Yes. I'm a little confused about that.
Yeah, we are different, but we do appreciate and work with Restore the Delta. Restore the Delta, I think there might be some staff here tonight Spencer's here.
Okay.
Nonprofit, Spencer, you can.
Okay, Mark, and the reason why I brought that, the reason why I'm asking is that when you were created like 9 years ago, you said, and right now we have a delta that really is a very equal, is a follicle that had no sense of an environment, like there's hardly any fish, there's hardly any wilderness, they have hardly any, everything just kind of dead, just the water itself. And then you can't go swimming, apart, So what solution, what are the things that you're trying to do as far as cleaning the water, or I don't know, able to do as far as our environmental way of in the valley, in the delta? That's my biggest issue of this environment. Thank you.
Hi, Douglas. This is Amy. Thank you for your question. It's a great question, and I would like to propose, if Morgan, you feel comfortable continuing the conversation, and maybe we can have an open discussion about that, or if it might be coming as part of the plan, if that's okay.
Well, I want a clarification. I'm not mad. I'm not picking the fire nuts. I just kind of a little confused. That's all.
Yeah, that's Douglas. I'm wondering if she can continue and provide some clarity as she's going through the presentation.
Oh, that's fine. If you want to do that, go ahead. I'll wait. Don't worry about it. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, Morgan.
No, that's totally fine. I think I appreciate your question and comments, and there are a lot of folks, including Restore the Delta, that are working on restoring, the Delta habitat, as you're talking about, and trying to make, the Delta waterways better for swimming and better for fish, and all of those components. And I can touch on like our role in that. But recognizing that there are a lot of different groups, and we actually don't do a lot of like the hands-on restoration work, but we try and support it in other ways. So I can touch on what we do, what our agency does. If we go to sorry, let me just go back to my slide. We can go to the next slide. The council we were really created as a sort of convening body, recognizing that just the amount of players and agencies and laws in the Delta are massive and can be very confusing and overwhelming for folks to navigate. So the Delta plan, we implement this Delta plan through what we call a covered action authority. So projects, they could be restoration projects, they could be development projects within the Delta, which is shown here through our law in green, have to basically show that they're consistent with our plan. So the plan has several policies, and some of those are around the environment, some of those are around agriculture, protecting existing uses, thinking about flooding, things like that. And then there's an appeals process where anyone can basically bring an appeal and say this project isn't consistent with this long-term plan for the Delta. So we've heard appeals for like the California Water Fix project, which was the prior iteration of the conveyance project. And that's another thing that can be confusing sometimes, is like that's our relationship where the Department of Water Resources is the project proponent, and we see like these certifications that come through, but we are not the proponent of that project. We don't like actually build projects in the Delta. We do a lot of coordination with other agencies to like see to a lot of the goals that are set out in the Delta plan. So the Delta plan has goals for restoring like a certain amount of acres in the Delta to just as you said, Douglas, to like provide habitat and those benefits associated with habitat. And And we amend the plan as needed as we have more information, more science. We have recently amended a few chapters. One was around the environment and ecosystem restoration. And more recently, we've amended a chapter that has regulations around like prioritizing investments for protecting our levees. And then the other arm of our agency works on like connecting decisions with science. So that can be a lot around like, you know, the environmental conditions that certain fish species need, water quality, things like what you're talking about for like having a swimmable delta. And this is done through like scientific synthesis, through scientific peer review of several documents, and just like identifying what the highest priority science needs are. So a lot of your organizations have recently received an email from me requesting community organizations that might be interested in partnering with scientists that have proposals for better understanding the Delta. And I think actually also Restore the Delta is an organization that is like does their own research specifically related to water quality and harmful algal blooms. We also have some initiatives where we pair community groups, some of which are on this call, with scientists. If community groups have data needs, so that can be around like air quality or water quality. We had our first round of that event 2 years ago, and we're doing another one this spring. And then we're also really trying to better pay more attention and bring expertise to the like human components of the Delta. So bringing social science research and interest to the Delta to understand, you know, the Delta residents. And recently also there was a completion of the first ever like Delta resident survey, which really helps to better understand the broader community and how they relate to like the natural systems and agriculture and like the Delta's heritage as a whole. So that's a bit about how we interact in the region. Spencer also has a comment about their research. I think it's just a comment, not a question. Yes. Thanks, Spencer. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So this is just a sort of short summary of how some organizations that are on the call and maybe others that you're familiar with in Stockton or work with have engaged with us in the last few years. So for our Delta Adapts, for our climate work, we co-hosted some workshops to really understand how our vulnerability assessment resonated with residents, and also to hear resident and community group priorities for like what would be in this adaptation plan. So we did those in 2021. As I mentioned, we have this environmental justice expert group that's been working with us also since 2021. Restore the Delta and Little Manila Rising are both in Stockton. And also as part of Delta Adapts, we have been working to like quantify communities in the Delta that have the highest social vulnerability to climate hazards, which is a combination of like exposure to hazards and then the ability to really adapt if there are like floods or extreme heat days and things like that. So that's part of why we're here today, is that we're trying to connect more specifically with Stockton and also Pittsburgh and Antioch, because those are the areas that have the highest social vulnerability to some of the climate hazards that we've been looking at. And yeah, I mentioned Science for Communities, and then Restore the Delta again has been hosting convenings around Mormon Slough and a multi-benefit project that they want to happen there. So our staff have been participating in that, and then several organizations in Stockton have been engaging in other forums that the council has either participated in or hosted in. Okay, next slide. So a little bit more detail about what we found from our vulnerability assessment, just like across the whole region. And then Annie's going to talk about some of the findings for Stockton specifically. So we looked at stressors here. So like changes in air temperature, precipitation, and just overall hydrology and sea level rise. And then we looked at these hazards, so flooding, extreme heat, drought, and wildfire. And we found several things. We found for flooding, that really is one of the biggest threats to the Delta, as many of you probably already know, and that the flood threat does not impact the Delta equally. And there are certain areas, including Stockton, that have higher flood risk. Delta water exports to the state will be just generally less reliable in the future with climate change. And our existing system doesn't really have enough storage to capture the anticipated increases in runoff and because of more variable precipitation. For water quality in Delta users, so may have like episodic water quality declines, and droughts impact agriculture in terms of having more saline water than what we had historically. And then also in terms of agriculture, we just know that the changes in temperature and extreme heat days really are going to be impacting just like our overall crop yield and quality. And lastly, in terms of extreme heat, Stockton, as you all probably know and experience, is pretty vulnerable to increased extreme heat days for the region. So we didn't focus as much on air quality, but we did find that while wildfire is a severe threat to the Delta, there is expected changes in wildfire risk across the state and the Western U.S. That will impact air quality, particularly in Stockton. So that's all from me for now. Amy, did you want to say something?
Yes, thank you, Morgan. Really appreciate this overview of your organization and of some of the work that you are doing. I'm just looking at the time and I'm wondering if between you and Annie, maybe you can give us an overview of what's the ask of this community steering committee? What are those discussion questions that you have, or like places for engagement for the community? And we can create an action item for that. And wondering if maybe we can leave time to have that discussion at a follow-up meeting. Would that be okay?
Yeah. And I think I probably went a little bit longer trying to explain, and we're a little bit behind. I mean, our ask is, I guess we can, so Annie, we can share the slides with the group. Annie just had specific results for Stockton related to like heat and wildfire and flooding. So we could scroll forward to a few slides.
Yeah, it sounds like in the interest of time, we don't want to go through that in detail now. I mean, I would say, well, first of all, I think we can for sure come back to a future meeting and talk more about this. I'm forgetting that these meetings, are they the first Wednesdays of every month? Is that right?
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think I just stopped here because these are the priorities on the right of what we've heard from like previous engagement with groups in Stockton. And we figured, we know this group doesn't work as much on flood risk reduction, but are all Stockton based. And we basically wanted to make sure that what we're including in the adaptation plan reflects like this group's priorities. So I think it would be just hearing your additions to these. And then if you want to scroll to the next couple slides, Annie was also going to share some of what we've heard from our environmental and tribal justice interviews. So these are just like the main topics. And then the next slide, this is just an example of like a distributive injustice topic like that we thought was relevant for this group. And then go to the next slide. we, have some big picture umbrella of like how we're incorporating equity in our adaptation plan. And then which is around like representation and investments and the need for better communication, which is kind of gets back to Douglas's question of like, what does the council do? And then the next slide just shows like where we are in our adaptation planning phase. And then the last slide were our discussion questions for you. So yeah, I think we could, if we came back, we could like just focus on this and have it be pretty informal since we gave the background.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm hearing that the committee would like to have some time to process all of the slides and the content that you shared. And I would encourage you all to kind of think about when that next connection would be. I see Margot's hand is raised. Go ahead, Margot.
This is Margot talking. I would just like to ask, I'd like to hear more about the adaptation efforts. And I'm wondering if you, you're the Stewardship Council, do you actually finance adaptation measures, or do you just make recommendations?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Right now, we don't like build projects, but our science division funds research. So actually a lot of what's come out of like our several years of conversations with agencies and CBOs and tribes is the need to like better understand a lot of our vulnerabilities. So that's one piece. But a lot of what we do is more around like partnerships and outreach and really like elevating the needs that we hear from the various groups that we engage with, and then working through our agency partners to try and like prioritize those. And a lot of that we see will be like in the plan itself as sort of like a framework for moving forward.
Mary Elizabeth, go ahead.
I'm very interested in drainage planning. So the city of Stockton uses 3.2 inches over a 48-hour period, 1 in a 10-year recurrence frequency. And I do not think that that is sufficient to plan infrastructure necessary for, the increased frequency of atmospheric rivers that we're seeing in our community. And we were so blessed and fortunate, not to have gotten a torrent of rain, this last time. We had some bad winds, but, nothing like those folks in Southern California. And I contacted the Central Valley Flood Commission, to find out if there was any standards, like what is a recommendation for planning that type of infrastructure, and they had none. What the city or the county of San Joaquin, they have theirs, which is a very similar number. They don't, go past a 10-year recurrence interval, which is very small, like a very usual type rain. But they did reference the NOAA frequency website. And, I would really like to see, because not only do we have flooding from river overflows and creek overflows, but we get flooding in Stockton from storm drain overflows. And so I'd like to see some guidance provided by you all for how to best adapt to those kinds of conditions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. That's a really good comment. And some of the flood analysis that we did was specific to levees, but it's a really good point that you can have flooding from a lot of other sources beyond just levee overtopping. And some of our, like the strategies in our plan touch on like specific strategies related to urban environments. But we'll keep note of your comment.
Great, thank you. And Morgan, I see that we have some comments there in our chat for you all. I am going to ask you if you want to take note of those comments, and it sounds like Morgan and Annie are committed to coming back to one of these meetings and providing longer time to engage with you all. So it sounds like the action item is to have the CSC, and Douglas, I see your hand, 1 second. The action item really is to have the community steering committee kind of go through this presentation, get familiar with some of this content, and then at some future meeting, have more time to discuss this. We do want to make sure that we come back to our agenda, because we do have a vote that we need from the community steering committee before we can implement some of the CERT measure adaptations. Douglas, I'm going to pass it to you to ask a question for Morgan at this time. So go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Morgan. Thank you so much for your presentation. The light thing. I know that your agent, do they look at other similar scientific community in the water that might improve the water quality of Delta, like adding new fish to clean algae, to clear algae, add new fish, a species of fish that will repopulate the way the water is. It gets so warm, it doesn't die off, the fish agitated or whatever, but can have the toleration through the particular environment. Um, is there any goals set up? I know that you had a slide prior that in 2000 and no, 2050 is going to be overheated in our environment. It's going to be super hot, so I just wondering if there anything is there any solution. Instead of hearing the problem, what's going to happen, our devastation, what are we doing preventing that we no longer have been be extinct anyway? You know what I mean? What can we add something to add to our Delta Stockton? That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. And we didn't get into the details of a lot of the strategies, but we do in the adaptation plan that we're working on, we do think about water quality a lot. Part of that is around salinity, and that, the Delta connects to the bay, San Francisco Bay, which is saltwater. And so, with variable precipitation and sea level rise, you have salt water coming into the Delta, which is obviously something that has to be managed for agriculture and for drinking water. In terms of just like water temperature and water quality, a lot of what we focused on in that adaptation plan is just around like management of the flows through the Delta, since it's a very highly managed system. So thinking about like operators of reservoirs, and when water is released, and tracking those flows. And as I said, like we're sort of like a coordinating body that's highlighting what we see needs to be done from the project, from we've learned from the project. But then there's many other entities that we coordinate with, like the State Water Resources Control Board that sets a lot of water quality standards. And yeah, so that's just around water quality, but there's a lot around extreme heat too, particularly for like urban areas around in our plan, it's more about like the greening components of urban areas. So thinking about like areas that need more tree canopies or more like green infrastructure, instead of impervious surfaces that make like the impacts of extreme heat much worse. But those are, yes, some examples.
So you're speaking this is Amy, you're speaking the language of the community steering committee for sure. And if you take a look at the comments, Morgan, there's a lot of feedback for you. Folks are, very hungry for more information from your organization and would like the opportunity to continue to connect. I am gonna invite you to please continue the conversation on the chat, and we can also send you updates or the notes from the chat as well. We will make it an action item to ensure that there is space and time for you to come back to talk to the steering committee. Unfortunately, because the committee does need to vote on the next item, with everyone's permission, I'd love to be able to move us along to talking about reallocation of funding for one of the SERP measures.
Can I just say really quick, yeah, it would be really great if you could provide us, like, I'm not sure if I am able to save the chat, but yeah, if you could provide us with the chat, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, is that Annie? Sorry, you were kind of muffled.
Yes, sorry, this is Annie Merritt.
Hi, Annie. Yes, we will definitely send you the notes from the chat, and you all are welcome to continue to comment in the chat right now. And we'll have the Air District coordinate with you all to think about when would be the next best time to have you come back. Stephanie?
Thanks, Amy. I just wanted to quickly add a huge thanks to Annie and Morgan for coming to almost tee up this discussion. They talked about it in their plan that I think this is, we really appreciate them coming to us kind of early, because this is, in my understanding of the project, kind of an early preview. The climate plan is still being like fully drafted and isn't quite ready to release. They're like finalizing things. And so this is all like an early tee up to get this committee ready to kind of view and understand the Delta, like the climate plan when it is released. And so like Amy has shared, we'll continue to work with Morgan and Annie to bring this topic that there's so much engagement around to add an upcoming meeting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Morgan. Clearly, we did not allocate enough time for you today, and I apologize for that. We're looking forward to having you come back. So for our next agenda item, we are actually looking for consensus on some modifications to the SERP implementation. So for this item, the Air District specifically, excuse me, Stephanie will be providing some updates on two important measures regarding the commercial lawn and garden program. And I'm asking all of the CSC members online today to please engage with the conversation, ensure that you're asking questions for clarification with the intention of knowing that after Stephanie is done with the presentation and overview, that we have answered all your questions and we're ready for a vote. We're ready to know whether or not we want to move funding or not. So with that said, I'm going to pass it to Stephanie to walk us through the update of these two measures.
Thank you, Amy. Appreciate that, the context setting, and I think hopefully this will be familiar to most folks that are at our last meeting. This was something that actually my colleague Jessica Olson kind of teed up, and we had Jermaine from Stockton Unified School District come and kind of talk about his vision for kind of Stockton Unified and making big transitions at the school district. And so this is really kind of a follow-up. We wanted to make sure that you all weren't trying to make a big decision about something just having learned about it. And so I'll very quickly go through the couple of slides we shared in the last meeting, see if there's any other additional questions, and then pass to Harder to kind of facilitate, seeking consensus on this item. So I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see this? Perfect. So I think as everyone knows, we have a measure in our Community Emissions Reduction Program, or SERP, for our commercial lawn and garden program, which is replace. For this, we're not thinking about kind of your, lawnmower, blower, whatever equipment that you all are using at your homes. For this program, this is more of kind of commercial equipment for things like schools and businesses. And it's to replace gas-powered commercial lawn and garden equipment with new electric options. And for specifically public schools in the AB617 boundary, there's even a more elevated kind of bonus for free additional batteries and chargers for all the equipment. We have 100,000 allocated in the SERP, and we're super happy to report. And I know this was an update that you all heard last month, but we had 133 applications, which is essentially is over the amount that we had allocated in the SERP. And so again, there were 133 applications, and this wouldn't count. This is for all types of equipment, things like chainsaws, edgers, leaf blowers, lawn mowers, to help reduce emissions at 27 different schools within the boundary. We were able, with the 100K allocated in the SERP, to move forward with 58 applications, but that currently leaves 75 remaining. And so again, like Amy set up, there is an opportunity to reallocate funds to kind of support those remaining applications for Stockton Unified. And so with that, I'll kind of tee up. We have in the SERP, and I think a lot of folks are aware through this process, there was a school air filtration measure originally in the SERP that we learned from Stockton Unified that they no longer plan to take advantage of due to kind of COVID funds that came in. And so we do have about over $2 million remaining to reallocate to other measures that we see in the SERP that are in need of it. And so tonight there's an opportunity to reallocate funds. And if you are supportive of this measure and this reallocation, we would be adding 386K to the commercial lawn and garden program to support 81 remaining applications. And if not, then we will continue to fund those measures without the extra enhancement that's allowed through AB617. With that, I will pass it over to Harder to help us facilitate this consensus building or decision.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. So it sounds like we have a decision on the table to make on the virtual table of Zoom. So I'd like at this point, if CSC members have any questions, any clarifying questions, to raise your hand and ask away. Hector, I saw that you unmuted. Go ahead.
Hi, so just a question about moving the funds over. If we're looking to move the funds over, it says there's 81 remaining applications. That's coming from just Stockton Unified?
Mm-hmm. That's
So
correct.
the majority of the money would be going to replace equipment at Stockton Unified?
Yes.
Okay.
Great question. Mary Elizabeth, go ahead.
Hi, so I just was I was concerned a little bit because we have then no money left for commercial. So when I think of commercial, I don't necessarily think of a not-for-profit public agency. So I appreciate, that the students, when they're on site, won't have to be exposed to gas operated equipment. But on your options here, it says support the 81 remaining applications. So add money or not add money. So but then for the not add money, it says without extra batteries. So what's the story on the batteries?
Yeah, thanks, Mary. And so through this program, through kind of the enhancement through AB617 for the equipment that Stockton Unified is applying for, we through AB617 can provide extra batteries and chargers at no cost to Stockton Unified. So that means that all the equipment, kind of the pieces that they need to help kind of with the longevity of using the equipment, they get those at no cost. And so that's kind of what that aspect of the program is. But Mary, you said something actually that I also want to clarify. And I think maybe, I don't know if there's maybe concern from the group of what if there's other groups that want to maybe apply to this. Should that be the case and we see the demand, we could potentially think about adding funds if there's that demand to maybe support people, if anybody else wanted to apply for the program that's not Stockton Unified. That's something that we can definitely work with the committee on down the line as well. We just saw the opportunity now and working with Jermaine, who I think has a really great vision for kind of, the work that he's doing at Stockton Unified to be able to support them and provide equipment, charger, batteries to ensure that they can use this equipment successfully at Stockton Unified. And that's kind of what this vote is specifically, but that doesn't mean that we can't continue to work with you all on this measure down the line.
Thank you, Stephanie. Espe, go ahead.
My question, and I apologize for my voice, but I'm sick. So my question is about, so the schools that would be receiving the funding, would it be the all Stockton Unified or just those located in AB 617?
I'll maybe start and then maybe pass to Jermaine for that. Kind of similar to all of our programs that we run through AB 617, it is to support schools within, entities, folks that are within the boundary. So it would be supporting schools throughout the boundary. Jermaine, I don't know if you have specifics of the schools or of what you were thinking.
Not off my head of all the schools, but there are 27 schools that are located within the AB 617 boundary. Those schools also carry their own equipments that use there on a daily basis, weekly basis. For instance, like how we have winter now, they're blowing all the time. This is the leaf times that they're blowing and stuff like that. So this is the reason where extra batteries actually come in for the help. The goal is to make sure that all the schools that are located in the AB 617 does not have any more uses of gas-powered machines using at those schools, not only for lawnmower. I'm thankful that Valley Air is actually helping us towards that with the commercial, but we also do the same thing towards of buses also to make sure that we do not have that impact within that area anymore. It's all about how is it that we can help to reduce our footprint and pollution towards this area that is already being over-polluted already. I see someone was asking about electric bus fleet being in the next school year as the fleet expand. To answer your question, there wouldn't be a problem charging buses going forward because we're working together with CARB and everyone and Valley Air to make sure that when we purchase buses, there will be infrastructure put down so that buses will be charged. And we're also working on extending solar panels, so they can have charging stations. This will also extend to the schools also in the AB 617 because I'm pushing that those schools need to combat more and need more attention that hasn't been looked at for years. So that wouldn't be a problem towards bus charging going forward also, if that answers the question.
Thank you, Jermaine, for that clarification. This is Amy. I also see Hector's hand is raised.
Yes, just for some clarifications, the extra 2 million remaining funds, was that all to go to that particular program, or is just a certain amount?
Thanks, Hector. I'm not sure what specific program you're referencing, but maybe just for background, we had a school air filtration measure that I believe, don't quote me, but I can check. I think it was about 2.64 million. There was a handful of funds that were allocated to that measure. And we had worked with Stockton Unified to try and get them, working with them to see if they're interested in the program. They let us know that we're not planning on using those funds. And so those are funds that we currently have and are working with the committee to reallocate to support other measures kind of when we see demand and the need for it.
Okay. And the one we just talked about as far as for the yard equipment, for the garden yard equipment, were you talking about all the funds going there or just a portion?
Yeah, just a portion of that. I'm happy to share my screen again, but.
And we have an idea where the other funds we're proposing for it to go, or we haven't got that yet?
Not at that time, yes.
Okay.
Thanks. I think those are funds just for, I think we've continued to commit to you all that we'll kind of work with you on reallocating those funds like as we see that demand. And so this kind of is an opportunity that we see that and which is why we're having that discussion tonight.
And Stephanie, I'm also seeing some comment questions for Mary Elizabeth in the chat. When we were looking at school buses, no private schools were deemed eligible. I hear that only 27 schools in the 617 boundary, but have 81. Is AB 617 funding outside of the boundary, such as chargers, more money for chargers? The city's new parking lot plans don't appear to include chargers or bike racks.
So as we concentrate on the AB 617, that's the only reason why I was talking about this here, because this is what we were concentrating on. There's other help for schools that are not located in the AB617 area that will produce buses and charging systems going forward for them also at schools. So there is ways of helping whereby we're going to have charging stations in the parking lots for buses going forward. At schools and at the facility yard at the present moment. That's something that is working on a 5-year plan that we will have. We're actually also working on making sure that the trucks that is actually from food service that will be going into the AB617, I'm starting with that area because that is one of the highest polluting areas. So because of that, I'm starting to make sure that those roads do not have any combustion engine going towards. But yes, on the outside road, we are providing equity. So on the outside roads, the same thing will also occur on those levels too. But we cannot do everything at the same time. I have to do it in stages. So I prefer to start in the AB617 because of the pollution and because of the community that is located in that area.
Thanks. And Jermaine, maybe I can add to what Jermaine is saying, because I want to make sure I'm understanding Mary's question in the chat about school buses. I see Mary's saying that there were is asking about, I believe, school buses, and that there are 27 schools in the 617 boundary, and have the 81 applications I maybe just want to clarify are for commercial pieces of commercial lawn and garden equipment. So that's things like these are big pieces of equipment. So maybe not so much thinking about like a push, one of those push mowers that you'd use in your own lawn, but like a ride-on mower that maybe is in like the range of like 30 to 40K. It's big, substantial equipment that kind of can help, maintain lawns and in big spaces. And so the 81 applications were related to commercial, like lawn and garden equipment, not school buses. And so we're not funding anything outside of the boundary. Is that, Mary, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah,
Yeah, just a follow-up. I'd like to see a list of equipment and prices. Ned brought it up, it seems like it's a quite expensive. And so what may or may not be like all the stops and whistles?
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Ned.
Yeah, sorry. I looked back at the original proposal. Can you hear me okay? Okay, LG.1, residential lawn garden equipment. This is old. 50 at $400 a piece. So I guess I'm just missing something big here.
Ned, I want to clarify, and I'm glad you brought that up. This is separate from residential lawn and garden. Residential lawn and garden, like those are lawnmowers that, folks would use at their homes. That is not the types of equipment we're talking about that for this. This is like big pieces of like equipment, like for example, a ride-on mower. Those things are much more expensive and are for the purposes of maintaining large areas, such as a school. So that's why that number maybe feels a little bit weird, is we're not talking about residential equipment. We're talking about commercial equipment for school, things like businesses or, school districts to take advantage.
Okay. That was LG.2, 5 at $25,000. So I just, it's been a while since I've looked at this, but I'm always interested to see that we get the most benefit for the cost. I certainly agree with the reallocation. That makes a lot of sense. But I've always encouraged folks to look at what benefit you get for the cost and what is the actual mitigation, the reduction per metric ton in the criterion pollutants. So I think it would help me a little bit just to understand that, both the cost per unit and then what are we getting. Our original SERP had estimates of reductions per metric ton for all of these proposals. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm seeing a couple questions in the chat, but I see Margot, you have your hand raised. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I really appreciate everybody's questions on this. And I guess the commercial lawn issue, that information has gone out to the public, right? But it's only the school district that has put in applications?
Yes, correct. And so this measure has been open. I'm glad you brought that up, Margot. This measure has been open for quite some time, and the school district is the first to kind of take advantage of it. And so I think there's I've heard just that interest of wanting to partner with the school districts when we can and provide that benefit, because I know we haven't always had that opportunity. And so far, they're the only ones that have taken advantage of this measure.
Thank you.
Thank you. So it sounds like at this time, there is a lot of questions. There's an action item to see a list of equipment and prices. I see Bobby and Jazzy have commented that this sounds good to me. To move our schools to electric appliances. Follow-up question, have we had other commercial interest with this measure? This was just answered by Stephanie. So it sounds like we may not be ready for a vote today, but just want to take a temperature check. Is there anyone opposed to moving these funds? By a show of hands, is anyone opposed? Debbie, one person.
I'd like to say this is Margot talking. I'm not opposed, but I do think there's been enough questions, and Debbie's concern about having more time is important.
Yep. Great. So Debbie, go ahead if you have a question.
We can't hear you, Debbie.
Can't hear you, Debbie. It looks like your mic might be muted. Go ahead.
I keep trying to unmute it. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
No. Can you hear me now?
You're cutting out.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, I just feel that there's something the matter with my this whole program. I downloaded the new Zoom and I undownload it. So
Hi, this is Laura. Hi, Debbie.
I don't know what the
Okay. Debbie, can you call in perhaps via your phone?
Yeah, we're almost done though, aren't we? Or no?
Yeah, Debbie, you're cutting out, and I can't. This is Amy. I can't make out what you're saying.
It's okay. It's okay.
I am so sorry, but I think I caught of what you said, Debbie, and with what you commented on the chat, it feels like what I'm hearing you say and what I'm hearing or interpreting from your comments in the chat is that there's plenty of questions that have been asked, and it does feel a little bit rushed. So if you want to go ahead and add any more questions on the chat, happy to read those aloud momentarily. But for now, we're going to go ahead and table this vote. It sounds like we're not ready to take a vote. And we'll be sure to add more information and time to process this request for our next meeting. We also have other SERP updates, but for now, we're going to move those to the next meeting so that we can have more time to discuss. I'm looking at the clock. Oh, go ahead.
This is Stephanie. I wonder, I think we don't have time for maybe the full update, but we do have one guest here, and I wonder if they could provide a quick, just like 1 minute update, because it's something that the committee has been asking for several meetings now about urban greening and vegetative barriers. I know we have Nico here, and maybe we can plan to bring them back at a future meeting, but since we do have them, I'm wondering if they could maybe share like in a very quick brief, like 1 minute, just like updates on those measures.
Sure, I don't mind. Appreciate the audience and the time, and I first and foremost apologize for it being so long. But we are continuing to work on our re-proposals for both the urban greening and vegetated barrier project. And for those who don't know, I am the urban forestry director at Little Manila Rising. We've taken into account the feedback that we've gotten from the subcommittee and from Valley Air District. In our last proposal, we were made aware that the purchasing of a work truck and a water trailer and a auger were deemed ineligible. So when we were told that those costs were ineligible, we had to go back to the drawing board and rescope the entire project because we are a 2-year-old urban forestry program and we don't have equipment. And the ask was pretty high for planting hundreds of trees and not having equipment and doing vegetative barrier work and workforce training without equipment didn't seem doable. So we've gone back to the drawing board. We've moved a lot of the funds that were going towards equipment into subcontracting budget line items. We are trying to find Caltrans associated landscapers that have worked with Caltrans on landscaping and maintenance, and are starting to have conversations with Caltrans, the administrative body, with Caltrans and with SUSD and Germain. We've identified 3 highly likely sites. One of them is Hazleton Elementary, and that's a multi-agency or multi-entity vegetative buffer, which would have a vegetative buffer on the Caltrans side of the fence and a schoolyard vegetative buffer and a number of planting sites in that school. The others are the Pershing exit, the Caltrans, that's Caltrans specific, and then there are some other City of Public Works right-of-way specific sites that we've had early conversations with Sue Christie and Colin Scott about getting permits and talking through what a maintenance agreement would look like for a site like that. Yeah, and we're continuing to work on the proposals, and we're working with Stephanie and her team to make sure that we're on track and we're not running out of time before they need to rethink opening up the RFP again. But yeah, for the time I've got, we did have slides, and maybe we can revisit that at the next meeting, but appreciate the time. And if there are any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat.
Thank you, Nico. I appreciate the condensed update that you provided today. I am seeing some questions in the chat there, and also seeing that Douglas has your hand raised. Douglas, go ahead.
Yes, I'm concerned every time, we try to get a vote on something and an item agenda. Well, we tend to get distracted, and then I understand there's a lot of things going on that we're supposed to be able to go through the year of funding organization. For me, when I have let me clarify what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that they're between residency. Yeah, I can hear you.
You can hear me, but it's coming across really not clear, like it's cutting out. I don't know if it's the internet connection or if it's just my internet, but I can't hear you.
Okay, I'm gonna use my phone. Hold on.
Okay, we only have 5 minutes left of the meeting, so if you could call in, that would be great. So I'm seeing Debbie has a question too, Nicholas. What about the trees for homes?
Yeah, so the urban greening grant will be focused on home plantings. And we've been able to connect with people at Public Works and SUSD to learn more about the Safe Routes to Schools program and understanding where children are commuting to school in the project area, and using that as our primary informer for our planting strategy. If we were to get into implementation with the project, we would focus our canvassing along the homes on those routes. And we have staffing that are focused specifically. Their work plan would be specifically for doing home outreach and doing workshops with recipients of our free trees. That is the focus of the urban greening grant, and then the vegetative buffer project is the one that has really needed to be rescoped completely without the
without
Hello.
being eligible. And so, yeah, but we'll be able to present more in more detail at the next meeting.
Thank you, Nick, for that update. Douglas, do you want to ask your question now before we go on to the next item?
Yes, I was wondering how many residential are we having compared to the CSC organization. So I noticed that the vote is for the batteries for the lawnmower. So are we going to get into that, or are we going to be distracted by other situations that Nicholas had brought up? You know, I understand that his concern and everything, but that's not a time and place that today we should be able to get things done, putting money aside, because it's not our money. It's a community money. We need to put the money that's needed to get the thing going as we proceed throughout the year. And that's what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Douglas. And actually, I wanted to clarify, because I think Douglas, I hope I didn't confuse anyone. The funding allocation wasn't just for the batteries, it's for the batteries and the full amount of the equipment. So if that was kind of the concern, that it's not just for the batteries and chargers, it's for that and then the total amount of the equipment. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. But thanks, Douglas. I appreciate that we totally agree, and we want to work with you all to move these things forward.
If I may add too, I think this is where we're all working together to try to change the AB617 together as a team. I'm working with Valier and you're helping me. That is one. Reaching out and with Lil Manila, as Nico was just mentioning, that he can identify stuff that we can plan. I think together, if I put it that way, I think that's the only way we'll be able to change AB617, as everyone's saying that we need to help the community. It's gonna take each and every one of us to play some part along that to actually change that community. If we're really looking to change that, we can look back and say, well, this is where we started and here we are at the present moment. You know, if Nico's planting, if he needs help to be doing certain things where I can help, I help towards that as Stockton. If I, just as how Valier is coming in also that we're doing for air filtration, we're getting a chance to give out home air purifiers for homes and stuff like that and go into every school. It has to be a collective effort between us to actually make that change. That's what I'm trying to actually put out together. And I understand some people might think about it. Some people might think about
Jeremiah. Go ahead.
Okay. No, I was mentioning some people might think about the cost, but it would be surprising to know that one lawnmower right now is 27 and 30,000 just to have a commercial lawnmower electrically to move forward. These things are very expensive, even though we're trying our best to make sure that we're reducing our footprint as much as possible.
Absolutely. So we're gonna bring that to the next meeting, and you teed up the last conversation very well. So the last item on our agenda is to have general updates. We have several for you tonight, but we are out of time, but we want to make sure, speaking to Jeremiah's point of collaboration, that we give colleagues from UC Davis an opportunity to announce one of their research studies that has to do with AB617, in particular, your own experience. So I'm going to pass it to Dr. London and Peter. I think I saw Peter on the line to provide a very quick update to what they shared in the chat so that you all can figure out how to connect with them and ensure that your voice is represented in the study.
Thanks, Amy, and thanks, everyone. We will be quick, knowing you're out of time here, but so I'm Jonathan London, professor from UC Davis, working with my colleague Peter Nguyen and a team of undergraduates. And we've interacted with some of you over the last several years on ongoing research on AB617 throughout the Central Valley, including Stockton. And so we've been trying to understand how well this program is providing benefits to communities throughout the region. And the intention then is to provide information both about what's working, what's been difficult, and how the program can be enhanced to all of the different leaders, and then share that information more broadly with people who really want to learn about these innovations. So today, we're putting out an invitation to all members of the CSC and other public members with an interest in being interviewed. We'll do about 5 to 8 interviews in the Stockton area, as you can see with those different categories. We're also observing meetings and doing media analysis and document review. But for the interviews themselves, they're about an hour long, depends on how talkative folks are. They're confidential and anonymous, meaning that no one will know your name except for our research team. We could do that in person or in Zoom. There's compensation. We don't collect individual information beyond what you tell us. We'll share information about the interview questions with you in advance so you can feel prepared. Completely optional. You can answer any questions or disregard any of the questions. We will also ask for your permission to use any quotes or statements in eventual writing, and you can refuse at that time or ask us to revise things. And then this will be put out into policy briefs and articles that will be shared again locally and beyond. So if there's interest in that, I also put this in the chat. You can contact me at this email address to set up an interview. We'll also be getting suggestions from the Air District and reach out to folks as well, but we'd love to make this an open invitation. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. And we will be sure to send out this contact information in the follow-up email that the Air District sends out for everyone. So with that said, we are out of time to read our action items from tonight's meeting. So we will be also sending the action items from tonight via email. If for some reason you do see that the action items are misrepresented or you have some edits, please feel free to respond to that email. We are scheduled to have our next meeting Wednesday, March 6, 2024 at 5 o'clock via Zoom. As mentioned previously, the agenda for that meeting will be determined by the input that we all provided during the strategic planning meeting that we had back in November. And of course, based on today's conversation, some items that need further discussion will be included in that meeting. We are looking for a community co-host, so if we could please have one of you all volunteer and be part of the facilitation process, we would greatly appreciate that. With that said, at this point, we are 5 minutes over time, but this is our official public comment. So if someone from the public has any comments that you would like to make at this time, please feel free to raise your hand or provide your comments in the chat. If other folks have updates that you'd like to put in the chat, please do so at this time. So I see that Gloria from Little Manila has an update. We can be sure to include that update in the email that goes out as well, Gloria. This is Amy. I'm not seeing any public comments.
This is Everett. I just wanted to thank the committee for sending some material for the Martin Luther King Assembly. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Everett. Appreciate that. All right. This is Amy. I'm not seeing any other comments from anyone. So at this time, I'd like to officially conclude the meeting for tonight. Please do know that we will follow up on all of the action items via email and look forward to having an engaging meeting in March. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Be safe. God bless you all.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.